This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 30 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Engaging Experts. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today I'm excited to welcome Marty Shaw to the show. Mr. Shaw is the founder and owner of Green Season Consulting, a full-service arboricultural consultancy with services ranging from forensic investigations to tree value appraisal and a lot more. He's an ISA certified arborist, a published author, and an experienced expert witness. Mr. Shaw, thank you so much for joining me here today on Engaging Experts.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be here, and it's a real pleasure.
Of course, let's jump into it. So you've been in the trees for most of your career. How did you first become involved as an expert witness?
Well, we'd have to go back to when I was a wholesale distributor for tree healthcare products, and I was calling on a guy out in Memphis. His name was Fred Morgan, and Fred was different from every other customer that I had. He didn't seem to do a lot. And I called him up and asked him if I could spend some time with him. And he said, yeah, sure, come on by. And so we spent about a half a day together. And we drove around and we looked at some trees and we talked about the trees and what he was going to tell the customer about them. And it didn't really click for me to understand what it was that he did for a living. I just didn't get it. And so I asked him if I could spend another half a day with him. And finally, after spending that much time with him, he was able to explain it to me in a way that I could finally understand that he went around and talked to people, gave them advice, and then they paid him to give them tree advice. And some of the times that he'd give advice, he would be talking to attorneys and people that were engaged in a conflict and needed to have an expert testify. And so at the end of that second session with him, I said, well, Fred, do you think I'd be any good at that? Because I heard that and I was like, man, that was for me. He looked at me and he said, Marty, you'd be great at it. And he was right. So that was my first introduction to arboricultural consulting in general. But the first experience that I had dealing with the potential for litigation and doing consulting in that arena. It wasn't long after that I became a member of the American Society of Consulting Arborists and attended something called the ASCA Academy. It's a week-long academy that the ASCA folks do, and they teach you about things like how to testify, how to write a report, and various aspects of consulting work. It seemed to focus pretty narrowly on litigation work, and that was the part that I was really interested. So maybe that was my perception, but for me it was all about, man, I want to get into this arena where you get to testify.
Did you know about expert witnessing prior to that, even as a topic at all?
I'd been called upon a few times as a certified arborist to testify in like General Sessions Court, really small potato stuff. And I was completely ill-equipped to do anything like that. But when I went to the academy, it really gave me a sense of, yeah, I can actually do this. Now, of course, at the time, I had no idea if I could even make a living at it or, feed my family or whatever. But I did want to do it, and I really had a desire to be good at it. And so I started buying a lot of books and reading different books. And then I would call the authors of those books whenever I had a question about what they wrote. And
Sure.
they all appreciated my calls, and I learned a whole lot and did a lot of research. And then I started getting calls from attorneys and insurance adjusters and people that actually needed an expert in their case. And I told them what my experience was as an arborist. And pretty soon I started getting cases regularly. It takes quite a bit of time to develop a practice as an arborist. And at the time, I just wanted to do it. I had no idea that it would be so rewarding. And so that was kind of my introduction to arboricultural consulting.
So you receive a phone call for an attorney or the representative of an attorney sometimes. What's that initial phone call like? What are the sorts of questions that they ask you to vet you to see that you have the experience and you're the correct person for the facts of this case? And how do you vet them and decide, hey, this is somebody who I want to work with and this is an engagement that's worth accepting?
Well, I've been around long enough to where people have heard about me from somebody else, or they already know that I'm the kind of guy that they want to talk to. I've got a pretty good website that's very descriptive and it details a lot of the different types of assignments that I do. So when these guys call, they already know what they're getting into, and they just need some affirmation that I know how to help them with their case, and I'll ask them a lot of questions that are very technical in nature. I'll give them some experience on how these cases typically go, what to look for, where the pitfalls are, because they want to know all that stuff. And then after about 5 minutes, they realize, hey, this is the guy. I don't need to look anymore. And a lot of times they've been looking for a while. It surprises me that people will have looked for over a year for an expert and not found one. And when they finally get a hold of me, they're like, man, where have you been?
Is it a fairly narrow field? In other words, are there a lot of experts doing what you do, or would you say that you're one of the few out?
Well, if I was going to make a suggestion to anybody thinking about becoming an expert witness for cases involving litigation, then I would suggest that they carve out their own niche, because everything that I do is very nuanced and very niche oriented. There's perhaps maybe a dozen people in the whole country that do what I do for a living, and I'm the top one when it comes to certain subject matter.
Absolutely. Do you know a lot of the other people on a personal basis who are in your field? Do you find yourself on the other side of the table, working in opposition to them? In other words, they're engaged by the other side. You're a plaintiff and they're a defendant.
Oh, I can do better than that. So I'll get a phone call from an attorney. It's kind of a juicy case, and they've talked to me and they are kind of hedging and hawing on it and not sure what they want to do, and we'll call you back. And then the very next day, I'll get another call from the attorney on the other side of that case, and they'll say, "Hey, uh, we'd like to look at this case. What do you charge?" And I'll say, I got a call from the other party in this case, and whoever sent the retainer check first, they're going to get the hire me.
Is it ever the case? I've heard sometimes from expert witnesses that in a field that doesn't have a lot of experts, sometimes one side will retain a specific expert just so that the other side doesn't have the opportunity to retain them. Is that something that's ever happened to you?
I'm sure it has. I wouldn't know directly, but there have been cases where I've been sent a retainer check and I never hear from them again.
Speaking of retainer checks, let's talk a little bit about your billing. Do you do a non-refundable retainer? It seems like you do. Do you do hourly rates, project rates? Tell me a little bit about your billing.
So I'm always going to offer a non-refundable retainer to people that want to retain me, and it's a minimum amount that I hold until the conclusion of the assignment. And so I do charge an hourly rate for most things, but when it comes to actual court testimony or depositions, I have a flat rate for an 8-hour day. And now if it goes over the 8 hours, I charge another day.
Sure. Do you have a travel rate, or is travel involved in your work as an expert witness?
Yeah, as a standard of my practice, I always charge for time of travel, and I also charge any expenses plus 20%.
Let's talk about prep a little bit. So you're getting ready for a big case. Maybe you have a deposition coming up. Maybe it's the actual trial. How do you get ready? What are the things that make you feel prepared and ready to go in action?
Well, in conversations with whoever's going to hire me, I always explain to them that there's a couple of different processes that we need to do so that we can be thoroughly prepared. And that's for his benefit or her benefit, as well as my benefit. I always write a very detailed report before any testimony. And the detailed report is going to contain pretty much everything that I would need to testify to. It's going to have all my opinions and conclusions and all the supporting documentation that you would need. to meet a Dalbert challenge or some other kind of challenge.
Have you ever been the subject of a Dober challenge?
Oh yeah, many times.
What's that like? Walk me through it.
So they'll look at your CV and they'll look at your shortcomings and they'll say, okay, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that, and you don't have this credential or that credential, and how can you testify about this or that? And it's just a matter of answering those questions in a calm and assertive way that shows that, yes, you are an authority on the subject matter and that the court should allow you to testify. Um, it's always a throw of the dice, though, because you don't always know how well the attorney that's on your side is going to handle the Dahlberg challenge, because it doesn't come up every day, but it does come up. And so there's rules and regulations that the court has to abide by in order to meet the Dahlberg standard. And so you're just explaining to the court how you meet all of those requirements. And hopefully the attorney that you're working with is familiar with them and knows how to handle it.
Have you had to deal with an attorney trying to impeach you on something that maybe you said 15 years ago, maybe taken out of context? How do you deal with keeping track of everything that you've ever said as it relates to your career and being able to defend those positions, or just say, hey, I changed my mind, new information became available?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You don't have to go back forever because I think there's a limit in most jurisdictions of 4 years. And so if you've testified one way in a previous case, and then in this case you have to testify in a different way or a slightly different version of it, then you have to justify the different information and the different fact patterns that are associated with that testimony. And so as long as you base it on the differences in the facts and not you just suddenly change your mind, or perhaps you found out new information by reading a book or what have you, then you're allowed to change your testimony from one case to another. You can't do it flippantly, though.
Sure. I've had experts tell me that sometimes, not necessarily Dober challenges, but a deposition can go on for a really extended period of time, 8 hours, more, sometimes days. Have you been subject to an endless deposition? How do you deal with not only keeping your cool and keeping it together and being able to answer all the questions, but just being able to deal with the endurance that it takes to make it through one of these sessions?
Well, normally there's going to be a limit to how much time that one side or the other can ask questions. I was once in a deposition involving a personal injury. This happened to be in Alabama, and there were 8 attorneys, each one representing a different party. And so they were going around and around. This thing did last 8 hours. And after 8 hours, my attorney just piped up and said, well, we're getting to the point now where we're starting to wear out the endurance of anybody that's going to be expected to testify. There have been, I think she's 1,500 questions in this deposition so far. And we're going to end it right now. If we need to come back, we'll revisit it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Getting ready for one of these things, besides obviously being prepared, reading your reports as you stated, things like that, are there any intangibles? I've had expert witnesses tell me they like to, do breathing exercises, do yoga, have a big breakfast, or, completely fast. Do you have any pre-trial or pre-deposition routines that just kind of get you ready to go, get you in the right headspace?
I do an affirmation, at least I used to. I haven't done them in years, but when I first started out, I was really nervous and I really timid about it, and just really uptight about it. And so I would take a few minutes in a quiet corner by myself, and I would just say, I like myself. I like myself. I like myself. I'm confident. I'm confident. I have the correct answers. I have a great memory. And so I would just do these little affirmations for about 5 or 10 minutes, and it really helped.
Let's move to the general a little bit. What do you find meaningful about being an expert witness? Or put another way, why are expert witnesses important generally?
Well, we work in an industry that where the nature of the beast is conflict. And if we do a good job and we are thorough in our investigations and we're clear in our explanations of things, then we have an opportunity to help level the playing field, clear the air, and help people reach conflict resolution. And ultimately, I think that's my motivation. I'm also one of these people that really digs justice. And so I like to see when people get what they deserve.
You've been doing this for a while now, boy, over 15 years at least. What have you seen change in terms of being an expert witness? I've had experts tell me that Zoom and telepresence has changed the way that they go about being an expert a lot. Are there any changes that you've seen, and are there any trends moving forward?
Well, there have been a lot of changes. When COVID hit, there was an awful lot of work that wasn't being done. A lot of courts closed down. But anything that did occur seemed to happen over remotely via Zoom or some other teleprompter type situation.
Sure.
And those innovations, I think, are going to be the wave of the future. I think as courts allow, there's going to be a lot more remote testimony than there is today. The courts have to get used to the technology and used to the idea that it's okay to have somebody testify from their own office or own workspace. And that's a big change. There have been other changes. Let's see. With the advent of drones and remote sensing, I can get a much better, more relevant picture of a site than I could ever before without the drone. It tells me exactly what the site conditions are at that moment. And that's a very informative piece of information because we can do a lot with the imagery. We can create elevation maps. We can do NDVI plant health maps. We can see the site as it is, and we can take measurements from a very accurate orthomosaic map. And so the use of drones has dramatically impacted my practice. And I was the first consulting arborist to use drones in my practice regularly, and now use it on almost every assignment.
Wow. Do these drone images lead to demonstratives that you might use in either in your expert witness report or in front of a jury?
Well, a picture says 1,000 words, and this drone imagery that I can create, I use a DJI drone, and then I take the images that I gather with that and upload them to something called Drone Deploy. And the Drone Deploy creates all these different types of imagery that tell me different things about the site that could be relevant. I almost always find something relevant to my work and the case at hand when I have the drone imagery. Without it, there's just so much that I couldn't do. And, it's like one of those technologies that you'll find a use for it if you have it. And buddy, I'll tell you, I have found immeasurable uses. It's the most profitable service that I offer, and it's the most useful tool that I own by far.
Do you ever get any pushback from engaging attorneys regarding site visits and sending up drones and all this kind of stuff? People who are kind of Luddites who don't understand the importance of this sort of drone testimony.
I think it's intimidating to them because I've never been challenged on it.
Have you worked in different venues? I know that you're located in Tennessee. Have you worked in other states, or perhaps at local and federal, perhaps in criminal and tort? Have you worked in a variety of different venues in your career as an expert witness?
Sure. In the United States, I've worked at every level of litigation, and then I've worked in 26 states. So I've got a pretty
Wow.
broad exposure to different jurisdictions and different venues, whether it's state or federal. Probably the biggest difference is whether you're a Fry state or a Daubert state.
As a very technical person, and you had mentioned this briefly early in our discussion, communicating these complex topics. You said that when you're vetting an attorney, sometimes you have a lot of very technical questions. How do you get some of this technical information across to juries in a way that they can easily digest it?
Well, that's a real skill. Because it's easy to get the deer in the headlights, glossed over eyes, and they're starting to go to sleep and drift. And you can kind of tell when you're testifying if you're losing them. And so I have a real knack for being able to take complex issues and boil them down to their simplest elements and then bullet point them very quickly and easily. so that we kind of seamlessly flow from one uh, uh, subject matter area to the other subject matter area, and then trying to tie everything together with simple, easy to understand analogies.
Is there something that expert witnesses can do to improve that skill, or is that something that you either have or you don't?
Well, practice. You just got to practice, and I would practice on people that don't know anything about what you do.
Just try and communicate your niche to them and see if they can repeat it back to you.
Well, people generally want to give you feedback, and they're very eager to help you. And so, depending on the audience, if it's your wife or your kids or whatever, um, they'll tell you if they don't understand something or if it doesn't make sense. Like a lot of times, people will ask, "Well, what is it that you do for a living?" And to try to make it easier for them, I would just say, "Well, have you ever seen that show CSI?" And of course, invariably people, yeah, sure, I've seen CSI. And I said, well, that's what I do for anything related to trees.
Of course. So a lot of people don't realize that expert witnesses don't exist in a vacuum. There's trial teams. Sometimes there's paralegals. Sometimes there are assistants. Sometimes there are a whole bunch of expert witnesses. Maybe you're in your field, but probably in a lot of other fields, especially for large litigation. Have you worked on larger trial teams, and have you worked with other expert witnesses in your career?
Sure. And I've got a lot of experience. I have a lot of connections that are cross-cultural. For example, I'm not a surveyor, and so I would never take on a surveying assignment, but I could take on the assignment and then reassign that task to a surveyor. And so I would definitely be what would be considered a lead expert on a case. And so I'm the guy that the attorneys go, well, we need this, 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 and this. Who have you got? And then I could say, well, this is outside of my area, but I can get this guy over here who deals with meteorology. And I got another guy over here who deals with wood science. And I got another guy over here that deals with this. And so staying in your lane is vitally important when it comes to expert witnessing. And if you don't know, you can always farm it out to somebody who does.
When you subcontract it out to another trusted party, is that just between you and them, or do they then become part of the overall expert witness agreement with the attorney?
Well, it depends on how the attorney wants to handle it. Some attorneys want to handle all that stuff in-house and they want their experts to work directly for them. Other attorneys are very happy to let you handle the subcontractor and let them work directly for you. So it just depends on the situation and how the attorneys want to handle it.
Let's talk about red flags for a moment. Are there any things that, either during the initial phone call or at some point during the engagement set you off and you can tell that something's not quite right, something's going to go wrong, or something needs to change? What are the red flags that you've experienced?
Usually the attorney is pretty clear on what they need. If they're any good, they typically want you to just do your investigation and they want to know what you find. The red flags that you typically run into are, well, we need somebody to testify next week and we need them to testify this, 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 and this. I go, well, that's not the way this is supposed to work. Maybe we better check back in a month or so after you had a chance to get some more time. And if somebody's in a real hurry, that's usually the biggest red flag that, hey, you just blew it.
Yeah,
You don't be able to dig you out of it.
Timing is something that comes up a lot. I hear from experts that a lot of the time they have these last minute jobs. In your experience, the attorneys typically engage you at an appropriate time where you have sufficient time to get them whatever it is that they need, an expert witness report, do whatever research that you need, go over the case materials that they send you, or do you feel kind of a crunch regularly?
Well, if the time constraint really gets iffy, I just bow out. I don't try to meet their timelines because I'm pretty
Sure.
low temp as it is. And I've got other cases, I'm not just sitting here working on their case and that's it. So I do have other cases that may or may not take priority. I did have a situation the other day that was fairly urgent because it was a personal injury case. A tree fell on a family, and somebody got hurt real bad. And so the attorney told me while I was talking to him, hey, the party that owns this tree is destroying the evidence, and they've got chippers and trucks, and they're hauling stuff off. We need to get down there right away. And in that case, I made an exception. I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. And so we did the engagement very quickly, and we got down there, got the information, and now we've got everything we need. Now we can slow down because we're at the beginning of the case rather than at the end of the case. So,
Are there any seminal cases that come to mind, things that either change the way that you fundamentally go about being an expert witness or reinforce something that you were already doing?
there was one case I had in Washington, D.C., and during the case, and during trial, I was testifying, and I made an emphatic statement about there was a fungus inside this tree to the judge. And the judge didn't like that very much. And he said, well, that's just hearsay. I believe that question actually went to the Court of Appeals. And I think they changed the rule now. If you have not cited the reference that you're going to testify about in your report, you have to cite it in the report, then they're not going to allow you to testify about it at trial. And so that was the difference, because before you used to be able to say, well, I talked to so-and-so who is the leading expert on this, and they said it was this. Well, they're not going to allow that anymore. They used to. Now they won't.
So do you have any expert witnessing stories that will either, motivate newer expert witnesses, or tell me something about your career as an expert witness? Tell me a story.
Well, I don't know if this is a motivational story or if it's just a very interesting, fascinating, wow, I never would have imagined kind of thing. So how about if I just wow you for a minute?
Wow me.
It's a case that I had down in a large major metropolitan city in the Southeast, and you could probably guess which city it was. But my client was an attorney who was representing a tree company that had gone out and done some work for a set of twins in a really, really nice, high-end, no mortgage neighborhood. And so my clients got the contract, and he goes out and he does this tree work for this set of twins. He gets the work done. And after they get the work done, a period of time goes by and they don't get paid, and they get kind of itchy about getting paid. And so they keep calling this, and let's just call let's call one of the twins Ingrid. Ingrid signs her the check and she says, thank you very much. Never call us again. Ingrid, in her past career, was an insurance adjuster, and she knew the game. And so she sues them. And that's when I become involved. They call me up, and it was a lot of money. Okay. We're talking, they were going to get buried in legal fees. So I go down there and we do the site visit, right? And so my attorney's there, her attorney's there, the tree company's representative is there, and I have a helper with me to look at the place. And I'm telling them, hey, show me everything that was damaged. I bring all of this information back. I do, 20 core samples of the tree. We do all kinds of analysis, and basically it's bunk, right? And so I write my report, and I never hear from anybody ever again. So I got another case in the same city, and I'm thinking, who do I know down there that I could talk to that could give me some information that I need? And I thought, oh, I'll just call the tree company up. I work for him. He's probably pretty happy with what I did. And I never heard from him again. So maybe that case is over, done with. And so I call him on the phone, and he says, Marty, did you hear what happened? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he said, oh, you've got to hear the rest of the story. So we take care of our business. And he says, well, you know that guy, the attorney that was working for Ingrid? I said, yeah. He was a womanizer and a gambler and a drug addict and a murderer. I was like, what? I've never heard anything like this. He said, well, your case broke the whole thing wide open. After your case, Ingrid found out he was stealing money from his clients, thousands and thousands of dollars. And he had already settled the case and he never told her. And so he was going to go before the judge and go to jail for 5 years and lost his law license and everything. And I said, oh my gosh. And I said, man, he said, no, that's not the rest of the story. Well, he was going to be sentenced that very day. He took off his ankle bracelet. He went over to his mother's house. He ended up stabbing her with a kitchen knife, stole her car, and drove to Nashville. The U.S. Marshals finally caught up with this guy, and now he's gone to jail for the rest of his life. Never get out.
Wow.
Wild story.
Oh man, you know that actually it brings up kind of a common topic that I get, which is expert witnesses don't really know what happens to the disposition of their case after they leave, because they're not there till the verdict. They're there for their part, and then they just kind of peace out. So yeah, wow, that's absolutely unbelievable story.
Wow. Well, thanks for letting me share it.
Wow. Let's talk about relationships for a moment. What makes for a positive expert witness attorney relationship? Not only how do you get off on the right foot, but how do you maintain that positive inertia throughout the engagement?
All right. So there's 3 things that you really can count on when it comes to having a good working relationship with the attorney. Number 1, you have to set down clear expectations on both sides. Number 2, you got to communicate. And number 3, you've got to show gratitude. If you have those 3 elements, then everything else is pretty easy.
Tell me a little bit about gratitude. How can an expert witness display gratitude towards an attorney who's taking care of their needs, and the vice versa of that?
Well, by producing a report and getting information they need on time. Usually these cases have an order that requires certain discovery to be done in certain time, and then all the other things that are going to be in place, and then you have the trial. And so as long as you get all your stuff done by the end of discovery or when the attorney needs them in a timely fashion, then I think that's showing gratitude for the work and also being courteous to, help them with their case. On the other hand, the attorney really only has one job, and that's to pay your bills. And to me, that's the greatest sign of gratitude, is when you get paid on time.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, do you have any last advice for experts or attorneys working with experts?
I think if you're first starting out, don't rely on being a testifying expert as your only source of income. You've got to be doing other stuff and ease your way into that practice. Eventually, if you're good at it, then the money will come and you'll be able to do it full time, but it does take a while. And so just be patient, do the work, do the time, and eventually people will find out about you and they'll come to you.
Absolutely. Mr. Shaw, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I really like your broadcast.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, as always, to our listeners for joining us for another edition of Engaging Experts. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Engaging Experts. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com.